I feel like this should have been a mukbang. That was one thing that I really thought would be fun to do with you. If we just had like a giant table of food and we would just be eating it.
Like a butane burner.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
And the grease is just getting on us. We would always joke that it was good for the skin to get the fat on your face.
Clearly.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
It's like
so
really exciting
for being
and
here.
a delight. It's insane to be in person, but I feel like it's a good conversation to have right now, especially because you have an acclaimed book, an acclaimed album, and putting the two of them together, because I was rereading Crying in H Mart and then also listening to Jubilee as I got dressed, which was inspired by, I was trying to channel the album.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
A Jubilee.
The book is like really stuck in, or not stuck in, is a photograph of a period in time that's like stricken with grief and trauma. And the album is this celebration and moves towards joy. And they both kind of came out at the same time. And you're promoting both at the same time. Do you experience a kind of like emotional whiplash from doing both? Or like toggling between the two?
Probably. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The album was supposed to come out last summer, and we decided to push it to this summer. And I think in the end I was really happy with the way that it got moved around, because in a way it felt like Crying in H Mart was the sort of end of a long chapter of writing about grief and loss, and Jubilee was this kind of new era of giving myself permission to move on and experience joy again for the first time. And I'm kind, I was really, there were a lot of petty grievances I had when I had to push the album.
Me.
Of just like, I was really obsessed with musicians' discographies and like subtracting their birth year from the year their albums come out to see like what age they were and if I was doing okay, my trajectory was going. And the fact that there was this 4-year gap instead of a 3-year gap for my third LP bothered me so much. And then, after seeing a little bit more of what was going on, I was like, okay, there's a lot more important stuff going on than your like Wikipedia page. And in the end, I'm really glad that it happened the way that it did.
Is that like a competitive Korean thing?
Probably.
Did the book change the dynamic that audiences have when you do your shows?
I think so, a little bit. I think that Peter has more fans now.
Because he's a character that they know.
Yeah, I think that like I've heard from a number of people that he was like the true star of that narrative, because they were like, I really thought he was gonna turn out to be kind of shitty. And he really like stuck it out with you, and I was so relieved. And so now if he like has a solo, I feel like he gets more cheers now.
So they thought he was gonna be a villain.
I think that maybe white men are usually the villain in narratives like this, but he did, he was certainly very supportive during that time.
One of the lines that I particularly loved in the New Yorker essay was, we chased our cravings daily. It's like such a good and evocative line of need. And I'm just curious to hear you talk a little bit about, food, your favorite dish that your mom would make for you. Because, I think one of mine would be like samgyetang, which is just like chicken soup that's like stuffed with rice inside and like jujubes and dates and things like that. And that was always that's what I have when I go home for the first time and I see her. So it's very specific in that way.
Yeah.
But I was curious what yours were.
My mom never made that. I feel like I never ate chicken in my household.
Oh, really?
We were like a beef and pork household, I feel like.
My mom never cooked pork.
Really?
Yeah.
My mom's like main ingredient for everything, I feel like, was pork belly. Samgyeopsal for everything. But every time I came home from college, my mom would always make me kalbi with dongchimi as a side dish and like kimchi chicken. Like it would be a full decadent set that I would eat like in front of the television. So that's always what I sort of associate her with is marinating kalbi like 3 days before I get home, buying a certain type of kimchi and making sure it's like the specific amount of fermented that is to my taste. Yeah, that's what I think.
Do you have any controversial food opinions?
Probably. I don't like posam, which is like kind of like popular. People think that I'm not a big posam fan. I'm not a big japchae fan. In terms of Korean food, that's like what
Those are definitely the. I feel like that's like the Taylor Swift of Korean food in some ways. Like and I don't mean that as a diss either, right?
Yeah.
It's like pretty accessible.
I don't feel like posam is that
You don't think
accessible. It's like boiled.
Japchae definitely.
Japchae definitely, but I feel like a lot of Korean kids have like a nightmare story with either japchae or naengmyeon. When I was a kid, the glass noodle like got caught in my throat, so I have like trauma from japchae trauma.
So that's why you don't like it.
But bosam, I think, is like really, it's like boiled meat. It's not really, I don't know how it became so popular.
That's true. I mean, I guess I see it on a lot of menus at Korean restaurants, so I sort of associate it with a kind of like populism, I guess. Like it's not like, because I feel like you like the extreme stuff, like reading Crying in H Mart.
Yeah.
I'm like really drawn to how, like the extreme flavors that you were into, like Myeongnanjut, which is like,
Oh yeah.
you know, like fermented.
Codfish roe.
That's right. Like it's an intense flavor.
Ganjang-gaejang is also an intense flavor.
And I love ganjang.
Yeah, I feel like my family loves.
It's like crabs that are like fermented in soy sauce.
It's kind of like uni. Like the taste is kind of like uni.
Totally, yeah.
This is so different than I thought it was going to be. Because I actually, the first time I met Mangchi, I saw her here, but it was like in another room, like a small room, like a classroom. And so I thought I was like going to be in like a classroom.
Should we go to the classroom?
With a microphone like clip here. But that's actually how I met her, was like I met her at one of these events, but it was in a smaller room with Hooni Kim, who runs Hanjan and Danji, 2 restaurants in New York City.
Yep.
And I brought her cookbook, and I asked her to sign in, and I gave her a copy of my essay, the first essay that I wrote for Glamour magazine about what she meant to me, basically. And I forgot that I had put my name and phone number in the corner because I was like sending it out at the time to like different essay contests and like all these blogs that wouldn't publish it. And then when it won Glamour magazine's Essay of the Year, I got a call from her, and she was like, "It's Mangchi."
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and I was like, "Who is this? Like, how did you get my number?" And I forgot that I had put it on the corner.
Wait,
it
so
all
then,
started here.
Then what happened?
She was just like, "I'm so proud of you. I feel like your mom." And she just kind of like, we just have kept in touch since then.
Did she feel like your mom or like an imposter mom?
I would never say that, I mean, she's been very generous and kind to me, and I actually got to go to her apartment for my 30th birthday, and she made Peter and I dinner, and it was very sweet. But I could never, you know, my mom could like hear it if I was like, she's not your mom.
What did she make?
She made bulgogi and like kimchi, and she got like a Paris baguette cake, and it was very sweet. It was really good.
That's cute. Would you ever do a cookbook?
I don't think so. You know, I don't feel like I've like really, you know, I like cooking Korean food, but I don't feel like a real interest in like doing my take on it or like, you know, exploring. It seems like a lot of work.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, it's a lot of knowledge that one must have. Yeah. Your middle name is Jungmi, which is also your mother's name. And I thought that was unusual. Do you know how that happened?
Why it was unusual that her first name is my middle name?
Yeah, or that you have the same name.
Yeah, I mean, I never really had a Korean name that stuck. I tried to come up with some, but they were always like, they never felt like they belonged to me.
So you had other ones?
I did have other like Korean names in like Hangul Hakgyo and like Korean school.
Okay.
But were really goofy and they didn't really stick around. I don't feel like they belong to me at all. But I don't know why I think my dad was like, that's a nice name. You should put that in the middle there. I think that, yeah, I don't know much beyond why they did that, but I was very embarrassed of it for a long time when I was younger.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting kind of like symbolic resonance because, you know, in the book even you say, if I could not be with my mother, I would be her. And the fact that, you know, you share the same name, essentially, I guess, yeah, the same name. It feels resonant in that way. I don't know if that's something that you've...
No, I think it definitely does. I mean, especially because it was, you know, something I shirked my whole life and didn't really get to embrace until after she passed away, really. And so it feels very full circle that it's something that I'm proud to carry with me now.
Do you still feel that way, that you're an embodiment of her?
I do, more than ever, I think, for better or for worse. You know, I think that when someone dies, even their like negative qualities that you inherit, you begin to forgive yourself for. So, you know, my mom could be pretty harsh and brutally honest and very judgmental, and I am also all of those things, but now because she's passed on and those things live with me, they're okay. They're not things that I should try to grow out of, and more than anything, they're a real comfort to me when I behave in ways that she did. But yeah, I do really enjoy finding parts of her in me that I didn't realize that I had. I always felt like I really took after my father, and then as I get older, I realized there are some really subtle similarities between my mother and I.
Were there some that were surprising to you later on?
Yeah, actually, one thing that my father shared with me is just the way that my mother socialized with people. I think that she had a way of getting close to people quickly that I think that I can have sometimes. I think it's...
If you like them?
Yeah, if I like them. I think that, yeah, my mom's a very social person in a way that I identify with.
You know, it sounded like there was a lot of conflict when you were little, or maybe an adolescent, between you and your mom. What would your mom have wanted your life to look like? Like, what job would you have had?
I think she wanted me to be a lawyer.
Sure.
Like most parents, she's like, you're so good at arguing. You would be a great lawyer, as if that's what that entails. Yeah, but you know, there were things that I do now that she was kind of trying to set me on a path on. But you know, they're just not really things that you begin to take on, I feel like, until you're in your 30s sometimes. Like wearing eye cream and visors.
Do you wear visors?
Now I've like begun to like, you know, really try to protect my face from this. As I begin to age, I like am like, I should have worn that eye cream when I was 12 years old.
Well, now I feel like full face visors are very in.
Yeah, I just got one at H Mart, actually. I bought one at H Mart like 3 days ago.
I got my mom one of those, like the V. Stiviano, like just giant shield face ones.
That's what I have. So it's like it's like black, and then like it's a visor, and then
it comes
you pull
down.
it down. But I didn't realize that it pulled it down. It can pull down, and then Peter was like, "Oh, you know, you can pull that down." And then I was like walking around like Darth Vader.
Something that struck me in the book was this idea that your mom said to keep 10% of yourself from other people or in relationships, which I feel like is also something my mom has said. But, you know, I was sort of interested in applying that to the book, right, which is supposed to be revealing of your relationships with your parents, yourself, what happened. Did you feel the need to keep things, like keep 10% for yourself, or did you feel the move towards full transparency like your father and just say whatever is happening?
I think maybe I saved like 5%. But yeah, I mean, there were definitely things that were withheld from the book to protect people, or just to present them fairly. Or sometimes you would try to include something and it just wouldn't fit into the narrative, and it would weigh, the scales would sort of weigh too heavy in one way or another, so it was better to omit parts of it. But I think that, you know, truly you can never really know someone fully. It was certainly very important for me to be extremely vulnerable and go really deep and expose a lot of that story fearlessly. But there were certainly things that were kept from the book, I think.
But there's, did you worry about the getting into like the sort of sticky, complicated relationships that your mom's dying created in relationships? Like, you know, like, I think her name is Gay. I'm not sure how to, Kay.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a really tricky relationship, and I was kind of fascinated by it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
And I was definitely really nervous about it. But I think that even, you know, there are a couple of, you know, there are a lot of really complicated relationships in the book, and I think that your job as a narrator is to present people fairly, and whenever you're going to throw someone under the bus, you have to be willing to do that for yourself. And there were certainly drafts of the book that leaned one way or over the other, and a lot of the revision process was figuring out how to bring in backstory and try to see things from different angles to understand and present all of the players fairly. I would say that I went into the book pretty angry at every person in my life, and it was a really wonderful exercise in like compassion and forgiveness for me to learn, you know, what these people might have been going through, and to try to see their side of what had happened. And I feel like that's one thing that's really wonderful about memoir, is that you learn a lot from people that maybe you resented for some time. I mean, even including myself, you know, I was so angry at myself and the way that I, you know, treated my mom in my adolescence, and how, you know, rotten of a teenager I had been. And I was able to look back at that period of my life and really forgive myself too, because, you know, I had no real reference point for our relationship, and that particular type of friction between an immigrant parent and a first-generation kid, and especially someone that felt so American and so confused with my identity. And I had no Asian American friends or media to consume that looked like sort of what we were going through, and so it was just a very confusing dynamic. And it wasn't until I really started writing this book that I was able to look back on that and kind of understand why we were the way that we were, and why I acted out the way that I did.
Were you able to sort of move towards, did you discuss the book with people who were there or remembered scenes or things like that, or did you mostly keep it to your own? Because it's very vivid and very specific, and so I was just curious if you kept a journal, or you talked about it with other people after, or like during the writing process.
Peter certainly read every sentence like 20 times. I didn't really keep much of a journal. There were, every time I've tried to keep a journal, I've started and stopped, and then I find those precious pages, and they're very helpful, and I always reprimand myself for not keeping one throughout. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of just collecting memory and sorting them over years and years. I think that the only person that I really tried to ask questions, I did ask my father some questions about my parents' relationship before I was born, and their life before me. And
that sounded frustrating. I think there's a line where he responds with like geography and facts.
Yeah, there was like, the second chapter was a lot more about my parents and how they met and got together, and ended up getting cut from the book. But yeah, I mean, I asked my father, and my father can remember like every promotion he ever got from like 1986 86 to 89 and like, you know, where he was stationed and, you know, how much money he got and his boss's name. And he had gone through all of these years, and I realized like in the process of him recounting these like 4 or 5 years abroad selling cars, he had eclipsed the year I was born. So I was like, I want to know about like our family, and you know, he was like telling me all about selling cars in Germany and Japan, and I was like, oh, 89, I was born that year. You don't care to mention it. But he was, you know, he's just so fixated on this time in his life because he had been, you know, so in his mind, such a failure for his whole life that those were the years that he really made something of himself. And so I think that he's just very fixated on that specific memory, and everything else is kind of like on the periphery.
Does that mean he would have picked the horse?
Oh, probably, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, do you see nonfiction writing or like memoir writing as a kind of, in some ways, betrayal of other people in some sense? Because, you know, you're writing it from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I thought much about it. You know, going in, I maybe similar to him, just everyone is a casualty, you know, because you are just focusing on the story at hand that you don't really think about anyone else. I mean, I will say that my father is a very open book, and my mother had passed away, and my Korean relatives can't read English. So I was like pretty safeguarded from like what was in there. But yeah, I mean, I definitely...
Has it been translated?
It's being translated, and I'm very curious what my aunt will think of it.
Okay.
But I think that she'll be down.
Have you talked about it with her?
Oh.
The book?
Yeah, I'm I mean, she's really cool. Like, she's a voice actress, so she's like kind of in the arts, and she's very like open-minded, I think, from what I can understand, what we can understand from each other. But I did tell her when I was working on the book, and I think that she was trying to share like the stuff about my mom that would be helpful in her way.
Well, in the book, there's a scene where your parents call you and they say that the chemo didn't take. And it ends with your mom saying "괜찮아," which just means it's okay. And I realized that there's a voicemail in Psychopomp. The title track of that is it's a sort of short soundscape, and it ends with a voicemail from your mom where she says the same thing. And was that the same conversation that you had written about? That was okay. I guess I'm interested in putting one in musical form and what that experience is like versus writing about it in nonfiction or memoir.
Yeah, I think people who are familiar with Japanese breakfast will find that there's a lot of borrowed lines from that. I mean, the first 2 albums are very much about the same period of time, but they're kind of, you know, impressionistic, you know, feeling, just raw feeling. So a lot of the chapter titles have lines like "a heavy hand" as a line in Rugged Country, and you know that could mean a lot of things in song, and there was always something to hide behind. But in nonfiction, you have to really unpack that scene, which was both exciting and terrifying.
Do you find is it cathartic in different ways?
Definitely. I think that, you know, music, there obviously is like a sonic component that makes it so intuitive, and there's so many kind of rules that are just like intuitive rules. Like, you know, you typically stay within the same key, and there's this, you know, pop structure of verse chorus, and there's a rhyme scheme and a certain amount of syllables, and so they all kind of like lend themselves to the creation of something that feels very just like a distillment of pure feeling. And I feel like writing is, I don't know, like hunched over a laptop. But once you get it, I mean, you have to really, I don't know, music has so much like left up for interpretation in this way that I think that you have to really guide people through in nonfiction and prose.
When you started Japanese Breakfast, you had you started it with a Tumblr, right? Where it was like a sort of like writing exercise where you were trying to write a song every day, and it was about showing up to the so that the muse can come to you. Is that still how you sort of approach writing in general?
Yeah, I find that that is really helpful for raw source material, and I feel like I really unlocked something for myself as an artist through that project of just, and I think that's sort of part of what you're taught in college when you're studying writing, is that, you know, you can't just like sit around waiting for something to strike. You have to show up every day and put in the effort and write when you don't feel like it. And, you know, I wrote and recorded songs every day for the month of June. That was the first thing I did for Japanese Breakfast. And I would say 28 out of 30 songs I don't despise. And they all made their way into, you know, then they turned into more developed songs, and I re-recorded them, and they're a lot of what the Japanese Breakfast canon is made up of. But yeah, for the book, I applied a similar approach and tried to write 1,000 words every day until I hit my suggested word count, which was 90,000 words. And so for probably 2 years in the back of a van, on a plane, in between sound check and showtime at cafes, I would try to just write 1,000 words of garbage, and then just like go, once I had hit 90,000, reread what I had and just like slice and dice it. And I find that to be very helpful for me.
We both did Yonsei, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you go?
When was that? I think that was I first started in like 2009, 2008.
Oh my God.
2008, 2009.
I might have been, I mean, I'm sure it could have been a different section of time, but I was probably there, I think 2008 or 2009.
Wait, no shit.
In the summer, yeah.
That would be really funny if we were
I hated it. Did you, what was your experience like?
I was obsessed with trying to be good at Korean. So I sort of, I did not love it, but I felt like this was, so it's a Korean language program at this university in
The Korean language.
It's like,
not the Korean, like the #1 Korean, it's like the Harvard of Seoul.
Well, I think that's
No?
Seoul Day. I think that's Seoul
Really?
National. Yeah, I would say it's Seoul National.
It's the
like,
Yale.
It's one of the top 3. Basically, there are like 3 fancy colleges in Seoul. It's one of the top 3. And they have this like Korean language program that like everybody goes to.
But in Parasite, where is the seal?
Where's what?
Like, remember they like make the fake.
It is Yonsei.
It is Yonsei. So don't you think?
Okay, let's call up Bong Joon-ho and ask him. Daniel Day Kim also, I know, right? Daniel Day Kim also did it like back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, which I think is really funny. So you hated it.
I hated it, not the studying, not the classes, but the social environment was awful for
It's
me.
bizarre.
It was a lot of like California. Korean.
I'm not from California.
But like, it was a lot of, I don't know. I mean, I find like a lot of the kids in my class were like very racist and really homophobic, and I would like just go back to my aunt's apartment and do my homework, and was not about that.
Yeah.
They were like into the clubbing, and I was like, I'm gonna go read at home.
Were you mostly with other like Korean Americans?
Yeah, and there were not very many mixed people. There
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like with like a lot of Japanese
Really?
people who were
Really?
obsessed with K-pop.
That's so surprising.
And like really good at grammar.
Wow.
Because the grammatical structure of like Japanese and Korean is very similar.
Really?
Yeah. So they like got things really fast, and they knew Chinese characters too. So
wow.
it just like, yeah.
They're like, this is just a square and a circle. This is so simple. What's your problem?
What was it like? You know, was it an attempt to sort of like because I'm interested in like how you see the Koreanness of your Korean American identity as I guess like after your mom's death, it feels like you were moving towards the Korean part more as a way to kind of like preserve her. I don't know if that's the right read on it, but
No, certainly. I think that was part of it, but I also think part of it was just getting older and being more comfortable with myself and where I came from and my personal history. And I also think that the way that the world is changing and being more like enthusiastic about our culture, it makes it more enticing to be, involved in also. Like, I remember growing up and no one in my middle school knew where Korea was.
Sure.
It was like, you're not Chinese or Japanese, I don't know what you are. And yeah, I mean, it's so wild to see Korean culture grow in popularity so much. And I think I'm so excited for this next generation to, be able to grow up with that and be able to hopefully be proud of their culture and heritage from an early age.
When was the last time you were in Korea?
I think it was in the spring of 2019, I was finishing the book. The first draft of the book, I think.
You were writing in
still
Korea?
Writing in 2019.
Were you touring, or did you do like a little writer's
I think we did a tour in Asia and we ended in Seoul, I think, yeah. And then I stayed for 3 weeks to finish the first draft.
And so you've been going on tour again this year. How's that been?
It's wild. It's like 0 to 1,000, socializing all the time. Just like, yeah, I mean, it's really strange. I just got off tour like a week ago. We were out for 2.5 weeks, and it's very bizarre. People are like, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna like socialize again. It's like, imagine being in front of like 1,500 people, like talking. But yeah, I mean, it's been really wonderful getting to play the songs, and the band has grown and gotten very good.
I did not notice this. My boyfriend noticed this, but you were wearing a lot of yellow in everything. Is there an intentionality behind that?
Yeah, I knew, I think that for me, the third album is like the first record that I could think of in context of my discography. And so Psychopump's album cover is this kind of melancholy sky blue color, and Saw Sounds from Another Planet is very dark, broody, red and black. And so I knew that for like this joyful era, we just got really into yellow. And I knew that I probably thought of the color yellow before I even thought of calling the album Jubilee or making a record about joy. I just knew I wanted the color palette of the new album to be yellow, and that I would be wearing yellow, and that this whole era would be like a joyful yellow era. So it was very intentional.
And I read that you said that you don't like changing things, so when Jubilee was finished, you didn't really change it afterwards. Did you feel that way about the book?
No. I was filled with deep shame when I turned in the book. I was really devastated when I turned in the book, but I had also just completely felt like I had lost perspective at that point in time. But I had thought that I had done a very bad job on this book, but I was just like, I can't work on this anymore when I turned it in. And then I was away from it for like 6 to 8 months, and then I read the audiobook, and I was like, this is pretty good.
I feel like writing is a deeply shameful activity.
Yeah, because like it feels like everyone can do it. There's like this air of mystery, like even if you can play like a G chord, so like there's like no writing equivalent of that really.
Right. But also there's something like the exposure is just shameful. It's just like nothing is good, Or that's the feeling that I feel like I have. We don't have to talk about that. So I heard that it's being adapted into a movie. Is there anything? And other people are hearing that too. What can you tell us about that?
I am writing the screenplay, which I thought was going to be very easy, and it's not. So I've just been watching a lot of movies, pretending to do research. But yeah, I think it's a very slow process, but...
Are there movies that have been helpful?
Yeah, I'm reading, what has been helpful? I'm like embarrassed because they're like really basic. So I feel like, but I feel like it's my main references are like Terms of Endearment, Almost Famous, and Lady Bird, and Julie and Julia. But like I don't know, and the
because of the
and the
monkey aspect.
farewell, and like, yeah, and then like this like joie de vivre and like food and just like the sensuality of those things, tempopo maybe, but. Yeah, I'm in the very like fledgling stages of writing it, and I'm still waiting to like fall in love with the craft of it all.
Do you? I know it's probably too early to ask, but are there people that you would want to play yourself or your mother?
Yeah, I feel like I am just really. I feel like it has. I don't know. I know that I would love to have like a Korean actress play my mom, because I really can't stand it when American actors put on an accent, no matter how exceptional they are.
They're usually not.
Yeah. And similarly, like I don't know if there is like a half Korean 25-year-old actress that we know of yet. So I'm really excited to like find them and give them this like very intense role, and I think that that's like one thing that's really exciting about this kind of story is that there aren't any like there isn't a pool of actors that you can just say it exists and this person would do a great job.
Totally.
So I'm excited for a new opportunity to be created for someone who's looking for it.
Okay, so we have some audience questions. That I will be filtering. The first one actually begins not a question, so I'm so sorry, but I'm...
Wow, I'm so curious about what's going on over there.
Where did you spend the bulk of your time writing Crying in H Mart?
I feel like my best, like simultaneously like very miserable and also very joyful times were retreats that I took in Seoul. So there was one 6-week period that I stayed in Hongdae in a studio apartment, which Peter and I will never do again. In the dead of winter, it was just...
Hongdae is great though.
Hongdae is great.
Yeah. It's like the artsy, college-y, music-y district in Seoul.
It's kind of like the Williamsburg of Seoul at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would not recommend staying like in a studio apartment when neither of you like have real jobs and it's like the dead of winter. And because I only visited Korea in the summer, my mom would always be like, Korea in the winter is really brutal. And I was like, you're just exaggerating. And then to be there in January, it's just, I was like walking around in a sleeping bag, essentially, just like freezing my ass off.
Yeah.
And so I had a very productive time in that studio apartment writing. That was where I did most of it. But a lot of it was done on tour and in the van, really anywhere.
Did you find something... I guess, it's interesting to go to Korea to try to pound out pages, I guess.
Yeah, it was like research, like getting to, just being surrounded like by that culture and, like hearing my mom's language and people who, look like our family and spending time with my aunt. A lot of the book ends up like kind of happening in real time. The time that I spent with Nami is a lot of it was happening while I was visiting Seoul. And
did your Korean improve?
I would like to think so. I think that if I were to write another book, it would be about documenting the experience of trying to learn Korean and become fluent for the first time, because I do feel like it improves quite a bit. Because you're just so desperately hungry to talk to other people, and in order to do that, you have to like really push yourself to learn the language.
Okay. Do you have a favorite K-pop act?
I am not a big K-pop fan, so like it's not that I don't like K-pop. It's just I don't know too much about it. So like growing up, the only K-pop band I know is like from like the early 2000s, and it's like really outdated. Do you remember Pinkle?
Oh yes, I do.
Yeah. So like my cousin was like really into Pinkle.
That was
so
Ihyori, right?
Yeah. So that was like my favorite. That's like the only K-pop band I like grew up knowing. But you know, like I like Blackpink because I like saw the documentary.
I feel like for me it was really locked in time when I was like there in Korea for a while. So Big Bang and G-Dragon.
Yeah.
were, like,
Big Bang. I know. Kojima.
Obsessed. Yeah. You approach similar subjects and emotions in your writing and music, and I'm wondering if you could speak to how your style or thought changes as you try to document a moment in song versus prose, or vice versa. This is from Claire.
Thank you, Claire. So thoughtful. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that, you know, you have such a limited word count in song, and you have to really rely on this sort of sonic counterpart. They're really hand in hand in creating something. Whereas with writing prose, you have the opportunity to explore the other players' like histories, and that you're, you know, putting two people in a room and watching them interact, and you have to have more of an understanding of characters is far more important, obviously, than in the short space that you have in song.
Do you have a favorite guitar pedal?
I feel like unworthy of it, but I have a Strymon Big Sky reverb that I probably use like 2 out of like thousands of presets on. But yeah, I feel like Strymon is like the, I don't know, it's like the Mercedes of guitar pedals.
I have absolutely no idea what that is. But I hope someone felt enlightened by that. So, well, I don't, okay, what's your favorite place to eat Korean food in Manhattan or Brooklyn?
You don't like want me to ruin it.
I don't like those questions because I'm like, let's keep it to ourselves.
I know.
But if you wanna do the question, but the other one, additionally on this one, is favorite venue you've played in the city. So.
Favorite venue I've played in the city. Well, we had, I would say like one of my top 3 concert experiences were the 2 nights that we did at Brooklyn Steel in maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And we're playing there again. 4 nights, baby. So I'm looking forward to that. I will. Do you think I should not say?
You know what? You could say whatever you want.
I have repped it before, so.
Oh, okay. All right.
I
It's
also
already
feel
out
like it's
there.
like not that popular. Maybe. Have you been to Chorango?
Oh yeah, that's obviously the best one.
I know. Yeah, I went there. I really like it there. Yeah. But it's underrated, I think. It's
Right.
kind of like off the beat.
It's not on 32nd Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, but.
And like it's kind of like old person food.
Right, but
like PG is like not really
the
like
kimchi
kimchi
is
PG.
really good. Yeah.
I like it's kind of like an older person.
Yeah, but it definitely got popular.
Really?
And like now I'm like annoyed because I can't just get a table.
At Chorango?
Yeah.
Oh, now I've definitely really ruined.
Oh yeah, no, it's really annoying. There's like a secret fried chicken spot that I like that
Okay.
I will not tell you. I will tell you.
Oh, you tell me.
Do you believe in soulmates?
I kind of like have my soulmate. So I feel like from a young age, like I was very, I was like a young romantic. I remember since like preschool, I was like, I gotta find the one. So I feel like I like dated with a passion my whole life, like searching for my partner, and I feel like I got really lucky with Peter, and I think we are soulmates.
So I have decided to read the comment. Because I started reading it and I was like, oh, it's lovely. Not a question, but I just want to say thank you. As an Asian American who struggles to connect with my mother, reading your book really struck me deep. It made me want to keep trying, because a relationship with a mother who has sacrificed so much to get me where I am is something worth fighting for. So thank you.
I'm sure you were just like, no, next.
Well, because all I saw was not a question, and I was like, girl, you can't do that.
not a question, but here's my heart.
It did very much feel like there is this, in Korean you'd say ashum of like, or this like bittersweetness of feeling that, your mother was becoming more creative, like with painting and watercolor, and it feels like maybe you were moving towards a place where you could understand and see each other better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was such a heartbreaking part of our story in general. I mean, I think not just for immigrant parents or Korean parents, but I think a lot of mothers and daughters, or any parent and child go through this period of time where there is friction, and there's this sort of renaissance period where you become an adult and you begin to sort of appreciate each other in a new light. And for my mom, it was, getting me out of the house and feeling like her job was over and that she could, release her grasp a little bit. And for me, it was like coming into adulthood and having this like harsh awakening of just everything that my mom had done for me that I never realized. I think a lot of parents and kids I don't know if this is actually said in The Sopranos, but I'm pretty sure that it is. But there's this moment where like Meadow and Carmela are arguing, and Tony Soprano says to her, mothers and daughters, like, don't worry, she'll return to you. And I think that really is something that a lot of parents and kids go through, where you have to kind of like separate in order to come back together. And in my early 20s, my mom and I were just starting to get there. There were like 2 or 3 like really wonderful years where we had begun to see each other in this new way and appreciate each other. And I think that was a heartbreaking time to lose someone. But I'm also really grateful that I got to spend the time with her that I did, and that we got to see that period of time. And there's so much loss in the world in so many different ways that I am glad that, I got to spend 6 months showing her how much I really loved her and that I would be there for her, and you hear stories about parents like literally getting swept away by a wave, I have a friend whose father literally got swept away by a wave and never got to say goodbye, and I had many opportunities to do that with her, and I'm very grateful for that.
What do you think she would say now about all of this?
She's a Tadas. I think she would be so tickled, and I would buy her a very nice handbag.
Chanel?
I would buy her a Chanel handbag.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that should do it.
Great. Thank you all
Thank
so
you all.
much for being here.